Canada supports Ukraine for two reasons. One, because we have shared values, a shared desire to stand up for what is right, and it is wrong to illegally, arbitrarily violate the territorial integrity and sovereign of a democratic country that is choosing its own path forward. After Ukraine itself and Russia, Canada has the largest number of Ukrainian descendants in the world. So yes, we will continue to stand up and support in every way we possibly can.
This is a conflict where we cannot fail. We must win, Ukraine must prevail, and we have to be prepared to be there with Ukraine and to provide all the support that we can. At the same time, we need to be very, very thoughtful around escalation.
All right, Justin Trudeau, followed by Chrystia Freeland, talking today about Canada's continued support. And right at the end of the Chrystia Freeland, of course, that idea about escalation. That's the question about that no-fly zone. Will we, in fact, step that up? Well, let's try to get some details on this. Michael Boire is a retired Canadian Armed Forces major and former NATO war planner. Major Boire, thank you for your time this afternoon. You've been asked the question, I am sure. You heard Chrystia Freeland there say, we're going to do whatever we can, but we can't risk taking that next step for fear of escalation. Do you agree with that assessment?
Oh, absolutely. If I can just add one more thing, I'm an adjunct professor at the Royal Military College of Canada.
Oh.
Okay.
And former Montrealer. I feel we should add that in there, too.
I beg your pardon?
And a former Montrealer, right?
Oh, Montrealer until it hurts.
Oh,
okay.
Okay, your question. Well, we see a classical Russian maneuver. This is right out of the doctrine books. They started nearly 2 weeks ago at the borders of Ukraine, advanced with light forces to figure out where the Ukrainians were deployed, seized some intersections, and generally got down to almost the capital of Kiev, which is their principal objective. What we see afterwards is the armored and artillery following them and deploying, and we see now that the Russian artillery has almost closed the circle around Kiev and Kharkov, and have done that at Mariupol, and are on the in the south. They're on the way to Odessa to absolutely shut down and isolate Ukraine from the sea. So the Russians are winning and the Ukrainians are losing. It's that simple.
Okay, but as you describe this, and I'm getting the idea you're planning this out, the Russian moves one after the other. Does this mean you don't have any faith in the fact that the Russians will stop at any point or observe a ceasefire, or the mission is their mission and they won't stop until they take Kiev?
Well, that's the way I see it. They're encircling Kiev now. They're certainly not frightened of committing massive war crimes through the use of artillery on civilian targets. That doesn't seem to bother them in the least. And the most recent strike on a hospital proves that. But we also know that the Russians can prolong this fight because they are close logistically. And it's regardless of what we hear on some of the media that tends to stress the weaknesses of the Russians, they've advanced quickly, they've advanced deep into Ukrainian territory in 3 places, and they'll continue to do that. Now, personally, when you look at the combat power available to the Russians in the Ukraine, they don't have enough now. That could change. They don't have enough now to get into fighting in a built-up area, which requires an awful lot of soldiery and produces incredible amounts of suffering and death on both sides of the wire. So that's where we are.
What do you anticipate happening next, especially if they do seize Kyiv?
Oh, I think it's very clear. And, well, again, if we apply the doctrinal template to this classical maneuver, they'll simply start shelling. They'll start shelling these towns until there's a reaction from Zelensky and company. And what they're searching for, remember, is neutralization of the country and the continued building of a Russian empire. Now, if we accept, and these are Putin's words, if we accept them at face value, there's no requirement to destroy the Ukraine. There's no requirement to level the cities. That may have to be done in the Russian mind because they know what they need. They need to have Zelensky come to the table and to accept Russian presence. And, of course, the Ukrainians, and I grew up with the Ukrainians in Montreal, are far too brave, far too courageous, and most importantly, devoted to their country. And I don't think they'll see that. I don't think we'll see that happening anytime soon. But this can only end badly, and it can really end badly if we start talking about unproductive moves like an exclusion zone over the Ukraine, or somehow shifting fighters to other places in Europe to attack or to, as they say, safeguard Ukrainian airspace. These are non-starters. These are acts of war. This is provocation.
Well, and some argue, of course, as you're laying out this strategy, that there's already been an act of provocation. I'm not saying that two wrongs make a right here, but there is the fear from some of the Eastern Bloc countries that if Russia is not at least stopped here, or if there's no deterrent here, let's simply keep moving east. Is that not a consideration?
I don't think it's a realistic one. I mean, Putin picked a fight in the Ukraine, a fight he knew he could win. Picking a fight against the alliance takes you up against Article 5, and that's an entirely different option. And the Russians, I don't think the Russians have the combat power to do it. And if we can remember that though Putin is the head of state, many of the most important decisions are taken collectively in the Russian hierarchy, so that there would be buy-in to that kind of maneuver, I doubt it. However, as we've seen in the last week, we have to reinforce the deployment of NATO allies into the east, into member states in the east, to at least deter the temptation that Putin might have of distracting us from the Ukraine and doing something else on the borders between him and the eastern countries of the alliance.
Major Boire, what about this other mindset that suggests, as you described it, let's say the Russians, in fact, do come into Kyiv, they force Zelensky to, I guess, give them what they want, which is recognize Crimea or basically come under Russian rule. The thinking that the citizens there, as you've just described them, are so fierce and so proud and so resilient, even if Russia is there and takes over, they will continue to fight. What happens then?
Well, we're looking into the future. It would be a puppet state. There would be tremendous resistance to the puppet state. Zelensky would have to go because he surrendered, and that's too bad, too. But I suspect that there'd be an incredible resistance to the Russian presence. And where does that take us? Well, it takes us into a scenario where an awful lot of weaponry used by urban fighters, rifles, portable anti-tank missiles, portable anti-air missiles, that will come in, and there'll be a very widespread resistance to the Russians. How that pans out, I have no idea.
Yeah. And what do you think?
But it would happen.
Yeah, you're describing a scenario where they both lose.
Oh, there's no winner in this. No winner at all.
And what about Canada's role? Do you think we're doing what we can do, what we should do?
Let's never forget that Canada's citizens decided long ago that this country would have a very, very modest defense effort. So what we're doing now is what we can do within the limits of that modest constraint. Mm-hmm. So we're preparing a reinforcement here at home. We're already sending a second reinforcement to Latvia. I think we're going as far as we can, but that's a personal opinion. That the Canadians want it otherwise remains to be seen. If Canadians do want a greater presence and a more significant effort in this war, they'll have to let their elected representatives know, because right now that's not happening.
Yeah. Major Boire, thank you so much. Very much appreciate your time today.
Anytime from Montreal.